Welcome back, everyone. I am Andre Mirzayan, the 73rd Youth Governor, and we are so happy to have you attend our final Fall Speaker Series event for this year. Just a little over 2 weeks ago, more Americans than ever before headed to polls and mailed in their ballots to make their voices heard in what is turning out to be a very consequential election. Today, we're joined by 3 journalists who are going to share with us their thoughts on the 2020 election and provide some insight into how they went from their high school newspapers to professional newsrooms. Please join me in welcoming Burhandra Lyons, video journalist from Cal Matters, Doug Johnson, a multimedia journalist from Fox 40, and Hannah Wiley, state politics reporter from the Sacramento Bee. In just a few moments, I'm going to ask our panelists to introduce themselves, but before I do, let me cover a few items for this discussion. As always, please feel free to submit your questions using Zoom's Q&A functions, and YNG core staff will pass them along to me to ask the panelists. Please make sure to mention your grade and delegation along with your question. Now, let's get started. Burhandra, Doug, and Hannah, thank you so much for being here with us today. I'd like to kick us off by asking you to just introduce yourselves and share a little bit about your news outlet and what a typical day looks like for you. And we can start with Burhandra, and then we'll go to Hannah and then Doug. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I'm Burhandra Lyons. I work for Cal Matters. I lead their video department, and now I'm covering justice. My day now is a bit different. Of course, I get up, try to work out whenever I feel like it, which is not often, unfortunately. And I'm listening to committee meetings, checking my email, responding to emails, calling people, and when I can, going out and talking to people about different issues. So that's typically my day.
Okay, great. And Hannah?
Yeah, thanks all for having me. I'm Hannah Wiley. I'm a state politics reporter for the Sacramento Bee. I primarily cover the state legislature, so the Senate and the Assembly and some statewide elected officials. A typical day for me, I often start my morning with yoga, which is keeping me very stable these days. And then it's really jumping into committee hearings, and maybe not so much these days because the legislature isn't in session right now, but it's following up on election stories and looking ahead to what's to come in the new year for the new session, second year of COVID-19. Yeah, and it's sometimes I end work early and can get out for a long walk, and some days I'm working later. It really just depends on the news cycle.
Okay, incredible. And lastly, Doug.
Yeah, hey, I'm Doug Johnson. I'm a reporter, general assignment reporter with Fox 40 News. Typical day for me is we get up, we get on the conference call, and me and the other reporters pitch stories about what's going on, what we'd like to cover. Then we hear from the producers and management about what they would like to cover, and come to a consensus. Usually managers make the final call on that, and then we go out and cover the story, whether it be going to City Hall, getting interviews, and getting, with my business, B-roll, what we call it, video of whatever we're talking about, is a big part of the day. Then these days, usually I'm splitting up with a photographer that I work with, and I'm going home and writing the story at home, and then meeting back up with the photographer for the 5 p.m. newscast and the 6 p.m. newscast, where we're expected to be live in the field reporting on our story.
Okay, thank you guys so much. So I want to start right off by talking about the 2020 election, particularly in California. So California is known for being one of the most progressive states in the country. We chose Bernie Sanders as our Democratic candidate. We have some of the strictest environmental regulations and highest state income taxes in the country. But in this election, a lot of ballot measures, from rent control to the gig economy, all seem to shy away from that progressive streak. So I wanted to ask each of you what your general thoughts are on the outcomes. Were there any races you were really paying attention to, or were there any that surprised you by the results? And we'll go in opposite order from the introduction, so we can start with Doug and then we'll end with Burhandra.
Yeah, obviously we were paying a lot of attention to the presidential race. I think that was the big one because of what we do. It's what everyone's talking about. But, because we're local news, we were very focused on the city council, the Sacramento city council races. And I would definitely say the one race that surprised us, I'm sure some of my reporter colleagues on the call here will agree, is the Stockton mayor race seemed to be a huge upset, at least in our eyes. I don't cover Stockton as much as I used to because we have bureau reporters down there now. But, you know, Mayor Tubbs had the endorsement of President Obama. He used to work for President Obama, and I believe the endorsement last election, possibly this election. And he had an HBO documentary about him. So that was certainly a surprising upset. I hadn't heard much about Kevin Lincoln until the election. I know he was a former Marine, and apparently he flew Marine One for during the Bush years, but that was certainly a surprise to us in our newsroom. And again, that could be because we have now assigned Stockton and Modesto reporters who cover it more. So I'd have to ask them if that was a surprise to them. But definitely in our editorial meetings, that was one race we were surprised by.
Yeah, thank you so much. Okay, and Hannah?
Yeah, I covered the ballot. I covered a lot of the ballot measures, including rent control, including Proposition 22, which was largely funded by gig economy giants like Uber and Lyft and DoorDash. And then I also wasn't necessarily surprised by the results of Prop 16, which would have reinstated affirmative action in California. But I do think that despite a summer of racial reckoning and a lot of nationwide calls for racial equity, from one end of the country to the other, including in California, affirmative action went down in flames, and it was overwhelmingly rejected by voters. So I definitely think that there is a disparity between ambitions in the legislature and what lawmakers pass through legislation or send to the ballot, and where many California voters are.
Okay, thank you so much. I actually, really quickly, before we go to you, Burhanda, I want to build a bit on that, because this year we saw the California legislature pass laws that forced companies that are located in California to have female representatives on their board of directors. Do you think that the legislature should look at how the California voters voted in this election and change that streak that they've been on, that I alluded to in my original question? Do you think that California voters are seemingly less progressive than a lot of lawmakers in Sacramento believe, or do you think this is just some kind of hiccup?
Well, I don't necessarily think it's a hiccup, because voters rejected in 2018 rent control, and I think time and again they reject or are not as open to the idea of raising property taxes, which a lot of Democratic allies throughout the Capitol community helped push through Proposition 15, including unions and school and community advocates. But I would say that, and I've asked several very vocal legislative leaders, progressive legislative leaders, if this was a fluke or whether or not they believe they're out of touch, I guess, with their voters. And for the most part, I would say they're very in touch with who sends them to the Capitol, their constituents. But it's voters in other parts of this state who don't necessarily, you know, in the Central Valley is not as progressive as the Bay Area, and parts of Orange County or San Diego County and the Inland Empire, they're not as progressive as Los Angeles City, et cetera. But so you see a lot of stark contrast in the California electorate.
Okay, thank you so much. And then Burhanda.
So I would say I kind of the same thing, wouldn't stray much from that. I think it was interesting how California, in terms of policing or criminal justice, they were overwhelmingly against getting tougher on crime. So Prop 20 did not pass. Prop 17, which would allow parolees to vote, that passed. And then on the bail bonds, that's kind of a mixed bag, because advocates were against it and then some were for it, and it put two sides who typically would be on opposite ends actually against Prop 25. So it's California it's a complex state. And I think one thing that was really clear from the election on all the ballot measures in California is that we're not as liberal as we'd like to, portray, or as we're being portrayed. And voters are quite complex. They didn't want a raise on their taxes, at least not on property taxes for commercial property. So I think it's a complex state, and the electorate is complex, and nothing was surprising to me. I wasn't surprised.
Okay, thank you so much. I just want to clarify really quickly. If you guys want to debate amongst each other about anything someone else said or just add on, please feel free. Just go ahead and unmute. We can just, this is a very casual conversation. So, but
Okay.
if no one has anything to say, we can go on to the next question, which is a little bit more personal. I want to talk about your guys' journey to getting to the point where you are now. When did you know that you wanted to pursue something related to the media industry? And what exactly do you do now? Because you all have a little bit of a different field. Some of you do print, some of you do TV. So could you just talk a little bit about the field you went in, why you chose it, and how you got to the position that you're at today? And we can start with you, Burhanda.
So I don't. My journey into journalism, I think I knew I wanted to be a journalist when I was about 7 or 8. And I didn't know what it was, but at the time, my grandmother would tell me all these bizarre, sometimes sad stories, and I would try to go to the library, actually get dropped off at the library to try to corroborate what she said. And I never could, right? Like she would talk about these hangings of her uncle, and I never could corroborate what she said. And I think I was in high school when I was on the school paper, and it sort of dawned on me that I would never be able to find those stories because she was Black, she was a woman, and she was in the South. And so I wanted to be a journalist. And at the time, my family just calls, they still call me probably the nosiest person they've ever met. And so I went to school. I had a plan. I went to undergraduate at the state school in Arkansas, historically Black college. And I knew the university, I tried to get internships, and nobody would, if you don't go to Harvard or Yale, you don't even think about it. So I said, okay, well, I guess I got to go to graduate school. So I came out to California and went to Cal. And then when I graduated from Cal, I needed a job. And so I actually went and worked for the federal government. And I worked for the feds I worked for them when I was an undergrad. So technically I have federal service and I'll get a pension. And when I was living in Montana, and when President Trump was elected, and probably a year before he was elected, I was telling my friends, I'm like, he's going to win. People stopped talking to me. I mean, it was a mess. Now, I wasn't advocating for him. I was just telling them the truth. He's going to be president. They were in denial. And he won. And my phone rang all night long. People crying, people just upset. And so that day I said, okay, I'm going back into journalism. And I just hustled. Like, I worked for free. I freelanced, and I got really good at what I do. And I ended up freelancing, and then I entered back into journalism. So my career path, as for most people who, don't go to the right schools or whatever they try to tell you, has been very, crisscross. It hasn't been direct. It hasn't been straight. And I'm happy to be where I am, and I worked very hard to get here. So I'd say to young people, don't let anybody tell you what you can and cannot do, because you can do it. Your path may look different.
That's incredible. Hannah, what's your story?
Well, that one's hard to follow, but I grew up in Illinois, and I don't know if anybody's familiar with the Illinois political landscape, but I grew up with not just one, but a couple of my governors going to prison. And so I grew up with the Chicago Tribune on my kitchen table, with, Governor Rod Blagojevich sentenced to prison. And we would have these robust conversations about social justice at my dinner table, and about how politics from Springfield, Illinois, or Chicago didn't serve the people of Illinois necessarily. And I think I've just always had a keen interest in powerful people and how they make promises that they don't always keep. And it's not that they necessarily can't keep them, it's that they choose not to keep them. And so I've been passionate about making sure that constituents are heard, because people in my neighborhood weren't necessarily always heard in central Illinois. And I went to college and studied political journalism and went through the phase of I loved all the President's Men. I love all of the traditional journalism movies. And after college, I was like, I've had no internship. I have not worked during the summers for any news organization. I've written for my college newspaper, I've written for the magazine, but I didn't go to a program that necessarily fostered a hustle toward the internships that you're, quote, supposed to have to land in a newsroom as soon as you graduate. So I actually taught for 2 years. I did Teach for America, and I thought it was a great experience for me to learn how public policy plays out on the ground level and how, again, resources promised at the top don't always trickle down on the ground level. And after that, I went back to grad school for investigative journalism at Northwestern and studied social inequities in Chicago, and then decided to go to DC for a political journalism to finish my my grad degree in DC, and fell in love again with the political reporting arena. And so I did a fellowship after that in Texas, and then have been at the Bee for 2 years. And so again, that winding path, and you're gonna make pit stops here and there, and it's really just about if the passion and the intent is there, you'll land somewhere.
Okay, that's incredible. Thank you so much. And lastly, Doug.
Yeah, well, I always had an interest, I think, in just storytelling. It's kind of a cliche to say, but that's kind of, I decided I wanted to be a journalist in college. I went to the University of Oregon, so it was kind of a small town, big university in a small town, which was probably a benefit because that was the route I went, was getting an internship at some of these local television stations. That's how I started. And in fact, a professor of mine who I think had worked for NBC News for a decade, that was his advice to me was, I could teach you everything you want to learn in the classroom, but honestly, unless you go and get an internship and see how it's actually done in real life, that's the best way to learn. And for me, I kind of went into TV, I think, because I had an interest in video and video editing and video production. And so you also have to write, of course, with what I do, but it's a different type of writing. You're doing much shorter, you're kind of condensing a newspaper article into much shorter words and into more the way we speak rather than the way we read. So it's easier is the bottom line. But my advice to young people would be to try and get internships if you can. Of course, it's not always easy, but again, and this is another big piece of advice, don't expect to work in the city you live in now or in New York City, especially for TV. You have to go to very small markets. I believe newspapers are kind of the same way, that you have to start small and work your way up big. Me personally, I went to Bend, Oregon, which is a very, it's heard of course, on the West Coast, but very unheard of on the East Coast, and a very small town. It's market, if you know how the market system works, it's market 192. And I had to kind of cut my teeth there. And before I came here to Sacramento, I spent 4 years in Las Vegas, which is smaller in terms of markets than Sacramento. That's only market 40, and Sacramento is market 20. New York is market 1, LA's 2. It kind of goes by population of the city. So, and again, that's what I would say to young people is you can't get married on the idea of, well, I live in Sacramento or I live in Los Angeles and I'm going to work only here in Los Angeles or in Sacramento. You have to kind of go to Bakersfield or someplace small to start, and then you work your way up to the larger markets.
Okay, thank you so much. So next, I want to ask, for people who work in the media world, there are people who work in computer science or technology sectors who have this dream in the back of their mind of dropping everything and becoming the next Mark Zuckerberg, the next Bill Gates, like this huge tech entrepreneur. What's that dream for journalists? For you guys, what is that one thought in the back of your head that when you accomplish that goal, you will finally feel that fulfillment and be like, I have made it? Is it some huge investigative story that you break, some kind of Watergate scandal? I already see Burhanda is nodding her head along to that, but just what is it for you? What is that inner drive, that end goal that you will make you feel like you have accomplished everything you want to in the world that you work in? And we can start with you, Doug, if you have an answer.
God, I don't know if I do have an answer.
Well,
This was always kind of.
We can do with Hannah first and then come back if you want.
Yeah, why don't you do that?
Okay, let's do that.
Oh God. I think this is going to be like a very cheesy answer, but I think it doesn't necessarily matter if you break this huge investigative story, which is great. And obviously I would love to do that. It doesn't matter necessarily if you write a book, which again is huge and is on my bucket list. I think what matters is like every day, are you doing work that's really important to your community and to your readers? And I have found a job, like I think of myself in my dream job now. I cover politics, and it's enthralling and exciting and energetic, and every day that I go into the job, it's new and exciting and fun. I think I don't know if anybody's familiar with Molly Ball of Time Magazine, but she wrote a book about Nancy Pelosi, and Molly's one of my mentors, and she's just one heck of a reporter who's dogged and determined, and she's, dedicated her life to this work. And so I look to someone like her and think that she's just produced excellent perspective on American politics today.
Okay, incredible. Thank you. And I should have added that in there too. If you already feel like you've accomplished everything, I'm sure you're all incredibly accomplished in your field. So
I have not accomplished everything, but I'm happy with where I'm at right now.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Burhanda, do you have a similar philosophy? Or do you, when I brought up the Watergate scandal or breaking a huge story, you seemed very excited. So I feel like
I like stuff like that. I think I like political sort of journalism because you are holding, as Hannah said, like the powerful people accountable. I think the best feeling for me as a journalist is when I walk into a room and a powerful person is like, what does she want? Why? Because that means that I'm doing my job and making sure that people are honest. And the other thing I think about journalism is it can be a very extractive field in terms of, you talk to people, you get an interview, you do a story, then you move on, then you move on, then you move on. And part of what I hope that when I have done my race and I got my government pension along with the 401k maybe, that I have done no harm to people who are just trying to, get by. My stories have not caused them pain, and have really actually helped push our country and our society forward. So that's all.
Okay, incredible. Thank you so much. And lastly, Doug, if once again, same thing as I said with Hannah, if you feel completely accomplished and fulfilled with what you're doing now, that is perfectly okay.
Well, I think we could always strive to be better, but yeah, I mean, this is really a dream job for me is to work, doing this job. Obviously, my dreams might be to be paid better for it or to be, on a more national level, sure. But honestly, right now, you can't complain.
Okay, thank you so much. And next, I want to ask about a lot of the criticism of the media over the past few years. I feel like a lot of it has been more directed at national news stations for either incentivizing divide within people and the whole fake news argument. What do you guys feel media has a moral obligation to be the speakers of truth in a society, or is there a different purpose for media? What do you think it is? And do you think that national news stations should take any of the blame for divisiveness in the country, or do you feel like it's misplaced? Because a lot of the people I've talked to, even in youth and government on both sides of the aisle, feel like they always blame the other side, the other news station, the news station that they don't agree with, that they feel is biased against their own beliefs, as being the ones to spark division within the country. So I just want to know, do you feel like media should take any of the blame for that? If not, do you think it's more among politicians, social media? Where do you feel like that really stems from? And we could start with you, Doug, if you want.
Well, I unfortunately do work for the Fox affiliate. Well, not unfortunate, but we have an issue where people confuse us with Fox News National. And what's interesting right now is that we're used to people on the left not liking Fox News or not liking us because they think we're Fox News. But right now, even people on the right don't like Fox News. So we're getting it from both sides right now. And it's yeah, I think when you're talking Fox News, yeah, I think they do need to take some of the responsibility of what's going on. But, you know, I think what a lot of the other national news is doing is great. Obviously, you know, there's a problem, I think, right now with people not understanding what a pundit is and what an anchor is, a reporter is. And I think a lot of the pundits have made it, you know, it's this weird gray area where people on CNN and people on Fox News can get on the TV and start spouting their own opinions and their own feelings. You know, Tucker Carlson comes to mind, but Anderson Cooper does it on CNN. And it does kind of blur this line of what an anchor and what a reporter is supposed to be. And that is a problem. But I think, you know, I think of like Lester Holt does a really good job of keeping it even keel. I think some of the traditional old school non-cable networks, some of the, you know, NBC News, CBS News, and ABC News do a really good job of doing what they should, which is being non-biased and just reporting the facts, even if, you know, they like the facts or not. But yeah, I definitely do. It's different, I think, for us because we have a truck that says, you know, Fox 40 on it. And obviously we have mic flags and stuff that say where we work. So people love to come up to us and blame us for every little thing in America. Definitely get to see a lot of that. And it's gotten worse. Definitely with the Trump years, it's a lot worse than it used to be with the Bush and with the Obama years. But yeah, I don't know how it is for print or for Cal Matters, but you know, it's getting worse for us, that's for sure. And we're definitely more visible out on the street.
Yeah, that's incredible. I didn't realize that it had really gotten that that crazy. But Burhana, do you have a similar opinion to what Doug just said?
Yes, I think people are honestly ignorant. They don't understand the difference between news and opinion. And I think a lot of national news organizations and journalists get beat up on, and then sometimes we beat up on each other because we don't realize or we don't accept that most people are not out to lie to you, right? We're all human, accidents happen, but the culture of jump on people and like, you know, oh, this is my opinion, it needs to be heard, has really given way to people feeling empowered to attack other people and specifically journalists. And so when we talk about where we are as a country, one, people don't have journalistic literacy in terms of if you get all your news from Facebook, it's an algorithm. It tells you what it thinks you want. It doesn't tell you necessarily what you need. It just gives you all the cake, but you need, you know, your vegetables too. The other part of journalism that I think people don't talk about is the fact that it used to be you would report at your local newspaper and you would do investigative stories, but you would also, you know, write the story about the kindergartner who got all A's. And you would also write the story about, you know, the family just bought this new house. And those goodwill stories go a long way. Meaning, if I write this story about, you know, these things that are not quote unquote hard news, when I give you the hard news, you've seen me invested in this community. You've seen me tell these stories that matter. So when I give you something that is also consequential, say, that may not be favorable to your favorite politician, you're more willing to trust me. And so I think a lot of journalistic issues happen because that avenue towards the industry has been imploded. So the avenue towards starting small and going big and going bigger and being at jobs for 30 and 40 years and building trust is just not there anymore. So it's unfortunate, but we still come out and write stories. And, people tell me fake news all the time. It doesn't bother me. I just laugh at it.
Do you think there's a way forward out of that? Sorry, really quickly, we're running a little bit late, but do you think there's a way?
No, I'm not in a rush.
A lot of people have the same sentiment that you guys have said, like what you guys just expressed. Every single person I've talked to about this topic over the past, like Doug brought up the Trump years, pretty much over the last 4 years have said the exact same thing. Do you feel like there's a way out of that? Because I feel like it's very easy to be very cynical about the situation.
If I can say anything to the young people on this call, it's you get what you pay for. If you don't pay for news, you are not going, well, I can say that. So TV news is a lot different because you don't pay for TV news, right? But if you only watch CNN and you only watch MSNBC, you're getting a very skewed view. So my advice is to watch your local news, to send, to communicate, to know who the reporters are on the local news, and also pay for it. If you don't pay for news, you're getting a lot of crap. You can't just look at YouTube. And I know I'm like the YouTube queen, but at the same rate, like I'm trying to get more information. And honestly, if younger people don't value quality information, then our country is doomed, period.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you so much. Hannah, did you have any last thoughts as well?
I've been called fake news on a weekly or sometimes daily basis since I got into journalism. And like Miranda said, it doesn't bother me. I have no problem going after Democrats as much as I have no problem going after Republicans, and my reporting speaks for itself.
Okay, thank you so much. So lastly, I just want one fun question, and basically, what's the craziest or most surprising thing that has happened to you while covering a story? I think we've all seen those cliffs and gaffes and stuff of, sometimes intruders if you're reporting on the street or in public. Do you guys have any personal stories like that? And you can speak up first, because it might take you guys a little bit to think of something.
Yeah, that's gonna take a minute.
I've had a lot of surprising moments. But one thing happened to me, I was covering a wildfire once and live on TV. The car, I thought it exploded, but the tires blew out because the car caught fire. So that was pretty surprising. But you always have the famous people stories. It's actually kind of sad. I went to a local funeral once, and Stevie Wonder was there performing. So I got to meet and interview Stevie Wonder. That was kind of surprising. A lot of things like that.
Wow, that's incredible. Hannah or Berhanda, do you guys, anything coming to mind?
I think the end of both last year's session and this year's session was pretty remarkable. But I'll focus on this year's session because it's more relevant. I would just say that this year, when lawmakers recessed back in March at the height of the COVID-19 panic, I remember it was like day 1 or 2 of working from home, and it was very unclear how long this was going to last. And I was watching on the screen these legislators pass an emergency $1 billion relief package, and then they went home, right? With months and months to go before the session was supposed to close out. And I remember feeling the weight of the moment at home alone, thinking, this is unprecedented. And what I will remember for years to come as a reporter is just how that $50+ billion budget the budget hole, and trying to fill that. And at the end of this session, one lawmaker testing positive, and many had to quarantine. It was a mess. It truly was an interesting ride this year.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you so much. And Berhanda, anything
yeah, so I thought about something. I covered Occupy Oakland, and the parallels between covering that as a young journalist and seeing what happened with journalists all across the country and the state being arrested during the protest this year was really gave me pause, because I remember covering Occupy and being tear gassed and like people being sprayed with rubber bullets. And just journalistically, that was an eye-opening experience as to how much really has not changed, and also to how nobody really talked about that, 10 years ago. And it was, it was bad.
Yeah. Okay, well, that's all the time we have for today. Lastly, do any of you guys have any final thoughts you would like to say? Any advice for people who maybe look up to you, or general advice for people in the program or interested in politics? And if not, that's where we'll end it.
I'll just say, if you want to go into journalism or if you want to stay in contact, I'm at calmatters.org. You can find my name and send me an email. And people are always willing to help young people who want to be in the industry. So never feel embarrassed or ashamed to reach out.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. Reach out if you have any questions or you have any interest. And internships are tough right now because of COVID, but I know we run internships. All the local TV stations here run internships. I'm sure the Bee and other organizations run internships. So don't feel afraid to reach out, and bosses and news directors and people, they love it when you take the initiative.
Yeah, agreed. Feel free to reach out, and it's the best job in the world. So, and we need more reporters.
Okay. Thank you all so much. This really meant a lot. It was great to interview and meet all of you guys. With that, this is going to wrap up our final fall speaker series for this entire year. So thank you for our panelists for being here today, and all of our delegates as well. And have a great Thanksgiving, everybody. Bye. Have a good night.
Have a good night, guys.